Hi, welcome back to the next story in this series Malgudi Days by R.K. Narayan. As we have told earlier, he is a very well known writer. He was a very well known writer of the last century, and the period he covers is the village life and the life of the common man in India in a imaginary village named Malgudi, somewhere in the south of India. And the scenes and the visuals he presents are of what used to be in those years in India. Now today we are starting to read a story which is named Selvi, S-C-L-V-I, Selvi. Selvi means beloved child, correct?
Daughter.
Daughter. It starts. At the end of every concert, she was mobbed by autograph hunters. They would hem her in and not allow her to leave the dais. At that moment, Mohan, slowly progressing towards the exit, would turn round and call across the hall, "Selvi, hurry up. You want to miss the train?" Still a lot of time, she could have said, but she was not in the habit of ever contradicting him. For Mohan, this was a golden chance not to be missed, to order her in public and demonstrate his authority. He would then turn to a group of admirers waiting to escort him and Selvi, particularly Selvi, to the car, and remark in apparent jest, "Left to herself, she'll sit there and fill all the autograph books in the world till doomsday. She has no sense of time." The public viewed her as a rare ethereal entity, but he alone knew her private face. "Not bad looking," he commented within himself when he first saw her, "but needs touching up." Her eyebrows, which flourished wildly, were trimmed and arched for her complexion, by no means fair, but just on the borderline. He discovered the correct skin cream and talcum, which imparted to her brow and cheeks a shade confounding classification. Mohan did not want anyone to suspect that he encouraged the use of cosmetics. He had been a follower of Mahatma Gandhi and spent several years in prison, wore only cloth spun by hand, and shunned all luxury. There could be no question of his seeking modern, artificial aids to enhance the personality of his wife. But he had discovered at some stage certain subtle cosmetics through a contact in Singapore. An adoring fan of Selvi's, who felt only too honored to be asked to supply them regularly and to keep it a secret. When Selvi came on the stage, she looked radiant rather than dark, brown or fair, and it left the public guessing and debating. Whenever the question came up as to what color her skin was, there was a tremendous amount of speculation on all aspects of her life and person. Wherever her admirers gathered, especially at a place like the Baudelais, where much town talk was exchanged over coffee at the tables reserved for the habitués. Verma, the proprietor, loved to overhear such conversation from his pedestal at the cash counter, especially when the subject was Selvi. He was one of her worshippers, but from a distance, often feeling Goddess Lakshmi has favored me. I have nothing more to pray for in the line of wealth or prosperity, but I crave for the favor of the other goddess, that is Saraswati, who is in our midst today as Selvi, the divine singer. If only she will condescend to accept a cup of coffee or sweets from my hand, how grand it would be. But alas, whenever I bring a gift for her, he takes it and turns me back from the porch with a formal word of thanks. Verma was only one among the thousands who had a longing to meet Selvi, but she was kept in a fortress of invisible walls. It was as if she was fated to spend her life either in solitary confinement or fettered to her jailer in company. She was never left alone, even for a moment, with anyone. She had been wedded to Mohan for over 2 decades and had never spoken to anyone except in his presence. Visitors kept coming all day long for a darshan from Selvi, but few ever reached her presence. Some were received on the ground floor, some were received on the lawns, some were encouraged to go up the staircase, but none could get a glimpse of her, only of Mohan's secretary or of the secretary's secretary. Such select personalities, however, were received ceremoniously in the main hall upstairs and seated on sofas. Ordinary visitors would not be offered seats, but they could occupy any bench or chair found scattered here and there and wait as long as they please and go back wherever they came from. Their home was a huge building of East India Company days, displaying arches, columns, gables, once the residence of Sir Frederick Lawley, whose statue stood in the town square, who had kept a retinue of 40 servants to sweep and dust the 6 oversized halls built on 2 floors, with tall doors and Gothic windows and Venetian shutters, set on several acres of ground 5 miles away from the city on the road to Mempi Hills. The place was wooded with enormous trees. Particularly important was an elm or oak or beech, no one could say which, at the gate, planted by Sir Frederick himself, who had brought the seedling from England, said to be the only one of its kind in India. No one would tenant the house, since Sir Frederick's spirit was said to hover about the place, and many weird tales were current in Malgudi at that time. The building had been abandoned since 1947, when the British quit India. Mohan, who at some point made a bid for it, said, "Let me try. Gandhiji's non-violence rid the country of the British rule. I was a humble disciple of Mahatma Ji, and I should be able to rid the place of a British ghost by the same technique." He found money to buy the house when Selvi received a fee for lending her voice to a film star, who just moved her lips, synchronizing with Selvi's singing, and attained much glory for her performance in a film. But thereafter, Mohan definitely shut out all film offers. I'll establish Selvi as a unique phenomenon on her own, not as a voice for some fat cosmetic dummy. Bit, by assiduous publicity and word of mouth recommendation, winning the favor of every journalist and music critic available, he had built up her image to its present stature. Hard work it was over the years. At the end, when it bore fruit, her name acquired a unique charm. Her photograph began to appear in one publication or another every week. She was in demand everywhere. Mohan's office was besieged by the organizers of music events from all over the country. Leave your proposal with my secretary and we will inform you after finalizing our calendar for the quarter, he would tell one. To another, he would say, my schedule is tight till 1982. To another, he would say, uh, my schedule is tight till 1982. If there is any cancellation, we'll see what can be done. Remind me in October 1981. I'll give you a final answer. He rejected several offers for no other reason than to preserve a rarity value for Selvi. When Mohan accepted an engagement, the applicant, more a supplicant, felt grateful, notwithstanding the exorbitant fee, of which half was to be paid immediately in cash without a receipt. He varied his tactics occasionally. He would specify that all the earnings of a certain concert should go to some fashionable social service organization carrying well-known names on its list of patrons. He would accept no remuneration for the performance itself, but ask for expenses in cash, which would approximate his normal fee. He was a financial expert who knew how to conjure up money and at the same time keep income tax at arm's length. Pacing his lawns and corridors restlessly, his mind was always busy planning how to organize and maneuver men and money. Suddenly he would pause, summon a stenographer and dictate, or pick up the phone and talk at length into it. In addition to the actual professional matters, he kept an eye on public relations too. He attended select exclusive parties, invited eminent men and women to dinner at Lawley Terrace. Among the guests would often be found a sprinkling of international figures too. On his wall hung group photographs of himself and Selvi in the company of the strangest assortment of personalities. Tito, Bulganin, Ehudi Menuhin, John Kennedy, the Nehru family, the Pope, Charlie Chaplin, yogis, and sportsmen and political figures, taken under various circumstances and settings. At the board list, there was constant speculation about Selvi's early life. Verma heard at the gossip table that Selvi had been brought up by her mother in a back row of Vinayak Mudali Street, in a small house with tiles falling off, with not enough cash at home to put the tiles back on the roof, and had learned music from her, practicing with her brother and sister accompanying her on their instruments. At this time, Mohan had a photo studio on Market Road. Once, Selvi's mother brought the girl to be photographed for a school magazine after she had won the first prize in a music competition. Thereafter, Mohan visited them casually now and then as a sort of well-wisher of the family, sat in the single chair their home provided, drank coffee, and generally behaved as a benign god to that family by his advice and guidance. Sometimes he would request Selvi to sing and then dramatically leave the chair and sit down on the floor, cross-legged, with his eyes shut, in an attitude of total absorption in her melody, to indicate that in the presence of such an inspired artist, it would be blasphemous to sit in a high chair. Day after day, he performed little services for the family and then gradually took over the management of their affairs. management of their affairs. At the boardless, no one could relate with certainty at what point exactly he began to refer to Selvi as his wife, or where, when, or how they were married. No one would dare investigate it too closely now. Mohan had lost no time in investing the money earned from the film in buying Lolly Terrace. After freshening up its walls with lime wash and paints, on an auspicious day he engaged Gafur's taxi and took Selvi and the family to the terrace. While her mother, brother, and sister grew excited at the dimension of the house as they passed through the 6 halls, looked up at the high ceilings, and clicked their tongues, Sylvie herself showed no reaction. She went through the house as if through the corridors of a museum. Mohan was a little disappointed and asked, "How do you like this place?" At that all she could say in answer was, "It looks big." At the end of the guided tour, he launched on a description and history, avoiding the hauntings, history of the house. She listened without any show of interest. Her mind seemed to be elsewhere. They were all seated on the gigantic cities of the company days, which had come with the property, left behind because they could not be moved. She didn't seem to notice even the immensity of the furniture on which she was seated. As a matter of fact, as he came to realize later, in the course of their hundreds of concert tours, she was habitually oblivious of her surroundings. In any setting, mansion or five-star hotel with luxurious guest rooms and attendants, or a small town or village home with no special facilities or privacy, she looked equally indifferent or contented, was dressed and was ready for the concert at the appointed time in the evening. Most days she never knew or questioned where she was to sing or what fee they were getting. Whenever he said, "Pack and get ready," she filled her trunk with her clothes, toiletry, and tonic pills and was ready, not even questioning where they were going. She sat in a reserved seat in the train when she was asked to do so, and was ready to leave when Mohan warned her they would have to get off at the next station. She was undemanding, uninquiring, uncomplaining. She seemed to exist without noticing anything or anyone, wrapped in some secret melody or thought of her own. In the course of a quarter century, she had become a national figure, travelled widely in and out of the country. They named her the goddess of melody. When her name was announced, any hall, filled up to capacity and people fought for seats. When she appeared on the dais, the audience was thrilled as if vouchsafed a vision, and she was accorded a thundering ovation. When she settled down, she was accorded a thundering. When she settled down, gently cleared her throat and hummed softly to help the accompanist tune their instruments. A silence fell among the audience. Her voice possessed a versatility and reach which never failed to transport her audience. Her appeal was alike to the common, unsophisticated listener as to the pundits, theorists, and musicologists, and even those who didn't care for any sort of music, liked them to be seen at her concerts for prestige's sake. During a concert, however it might be, wherever it might be, Madras, Delhi, London, New York, or Singapore, Mohan occupied, as a rule, the center seat in the first row of the auditorium and riveted his gaze on the singer. leaving people to wonder whether he was lost in her spell or whether he was inspiring her by thought transference. Though his eyes were on her, his mind would be busy doing complicated arithmetic with reference to monetary problems, and he would also watch unobtrusively for any tape recorder that might be smuggled into the hall. He never permitted tape recording of her music, and noted slyly the reactions of the VIPs flanking him. He planned every concert in detail. He would sit up in the afternoon with Selvi and suggest gently but firmly, "Won't you like to start with the Kalyani Varnam, the minor one?" And she would say yes, never having been able to utter any other word in her life. He would continue, "The second item had better be Tyagaraja's composition in Begada. It will be good to have a contrasting raga." And then his list would go on to fill up about 4 hours. Don't bother to elaborate any Pallavi for this audience, but work out briefly a little detail in the Thodi composition. Afterwards, you may add a little item, any item like bhajan or javlis or folk songs, offering her a freedom which was worthless, since the program as devised would be tight-fitting for the duration of the concert, which according to his rule should never exceed 4 hours. But for my planning and guidance, she would make a mess, which none realizes, he often reflected. Everyone curried Mohan's favor and goodwill in the hope that it would lead him to the proximity of the star. Mohan did encourage a particular class to call on him and received them in the central hall of Lolly Terrace. He would call aloud to Selvi when the person arrived, "Here is so and so, come." It would be no ordinary name, only a minister or an inspector general of police or the managing director of a textile mill or a newspaper editor who in turn would always be eager to do some favor for Mohan, hoping thereby to be recognized eventually by Selvi as a special friend of the family. Selvi would come out of her chamber 10 minutes after being summoned and act her part with precision, a wonderful smile and namaste with her palms gently pressed together, which would send a thrill down the spine of the distinguished visitor, who would generally refer to her last concert and confess how deeply moving it had been, and how a particular raga kept ringing in his ears all that evening, long after the performance. Selvi had appropriate lines in reply to such praise. "Of course, I feel honored that my little effort has pleased a person of your caliber." While Mohan would intersperse with a joke or a personal remark, he didn't want any visitor, however important, to hold her attention, but would draw it to himself at the right moment. At the end, Mohan would feel gratified that his tutored lines, gestures and expressions were perfectly delivered by Selvi. He would congratulate himself on shaping her so successfully into a celebrity. But for my efforts, she would still be another version of her mother and brother, typical Vinayak Mudali street products, and nothing beyond that. I am glad I have been able to train her so well. In order that she might quickly get out of the contamination of Vinayak Mudali street, he gently, unobtrusively began to isolate her from her mother, brother and sister. As time went on, she saw less and less of them. At the beginning, a car would be sent to fetch them once a week. But as Selvi's public engagements increased, her mother and others were gradually allowed to fade out of her life. Selvi tried once or twice to speak to Mohan about her mother, But he looked annoyed and said, "They must be all right. I'll arrange to get them. But where is the time for it? When we are able to spend at least 3 days at home, we'll get them here." Such a break was rare. Generally, they came home by train or car and left again within 24 hours. On occasions when they did have time, as if she if she timidly mentioned her mother, he would almost snap, I know. I'll send money to Vinayak Street, but some other time. We have asked the gardener to lunch tomorrow and they will expect you to sing. Informally, of course, for just 30 minutes. The day after that, Selvi would put in hesitantly and he would ignore her and move off to make a telephone call. Selvi understood and resigned herself to it and never again mentioned her mother. If my own mother can't see me, she thought, again and again, in sheer secret anguish, having none to whom she could speak her feelings. Mohan, noticing that she didn't bother him about her mother anymore, felt happy that she had got over her obsession. That's the right way. Only a baby would bother about its mother. He congratulated himself again on the way he was handling her. Months and years passed thus. Selvi did not keep any reckoning of it, but went through her career like an automaton, switching on and off her music as ordered. They were in Calcutta for a series of concerts when news of her mother's death reached her. When she heard it, she refused to come out of her room in the hotel and wanted all her engagements cancelled. Mohan, who went into her room to coax her, swiftly withdrew when he noticed her tear-drenched face and disheveled hair. All through the train journey back, she kept looking out of the window and never spoke a word, although Mohan did his best to engage her in talk. He was puzzled by her mood. Although she was generally not talkative, she would at least listen to whatever was said to her and intersperse an occasional monosyllabic comment. Now, for a stretch of a 36-hour journey, she never spoke a word or looked in his direction. When they reached home, he immediately arranged to take her down to Vinayak Mudali's street and accompanied her himself to honor the dead officially, feeling certain that his gesture would be appreciated by Selvi. Both the big car and Mohan, in his whitest handsman clothes, seemed ill-fitting in those surroundings. His car blocked half the street in which Selvi's mother had lived. Selvi's sister, who married and had children in Singapore, could not come, and her brother's whereabouts were unknown. A neighbor dropped in to explain the circumstances of the old lady's death and how they had to take charge of the body and so forth. Mohan tried to cut short this narration and send him away, since it was unusual to let a nondescript talk to Selvi directly. But she said to Mohan, "You may go back to the terrace if you like. I'm staying here." Mohan had not expected her to talk to him in that manner. He felt confused and muttered, "By all means, I'll send back the car. When do you want it?" "Never. I'm staying here as I did before." "How can you? In this street?" She ignored his objection and said, "My mother was my guru. Here she taught me music, lived and died. I'll also live and die here. What is good for her is good for me too." He had never known her to be so truculent or voluble. She had been for years so mild and complacent that he never thought she could act or speak beyond what she was taught. He lingered, waited for a while, hoping for a change of mood. Meanwhile, the neighbor was going on with his narration, omitting no detail of the old lady's last moments and the problems that arose in connection with the performance of the final obsequies. I did not know where to reach you, but finally we carried her across the river, and I lit the pyre with my own hands and dissolved the ashes in the Sarayu. After all, I had known her as a boy, and you remember how I used to call her auntie and sit up and listen when you were practicing? Oh, not these days, of course. I can't afford to buy a ticket or get anywhere near the hall where you sing. Mohan watched in consternation. He had never known her to go beyond the script written by him. She had never spoken to anyone or stayed in a company after receiving his signal to terminate the interview and withdraw. Today it didn't work. She ignored his signal, and the man from Vinayak neighborhood went on in a frenzy of reliving the funeral. He felt triumphant to have been of help in a unique situation. After waiting impatiently, Mohan rose to go. Anything you want to be sent down? He asked. Nothing, she replied. He saw that she had worn an old sari and had no makeup or jewelry, having left it all behind at the terrace. You mean to say you'll need nothing? Yes, I need nothing, she said. How will you manage? She didn't answer. He asked weakly, you have the series at Bhopal. Shall I tell them to change the dates? For the first time, he was consulting her on such a problem. She simply said, do what you like. What do you mean by that? No answer. He stepped out and drove away. The car had attracted a crowd which now turned its attention to Selvi. They came forward to stare at her, a rare luxury for most, the citadel having been impregnable all these years. She had been only a hearsay and a myth to most people. Someone said, why did you not come to your mother's help? She was asking for you. Shelby broke down and was convulsed in sobs. 3 days later, Mohan came again to announce, on the 30th, you have to receive an honorary degree at the Delhi University. She just shook her head negatively. The Prime Minister will be presiding over the function. When pressed, she just said, please leave me out of all this. Leave me alone. I want to be alone hereafter. I can't bear the sight of anyone. Just this one engagement. Do what you like after that. Otherwise, it will be the most compromising. Only one day at Delhi. We'll get back immediately. Also, you signed the gramophone contract for the recording next month. She didn't reply. Her look suggested that it was not her concern. You will be landing me in trouble, at least the present commitments. It was difficult to carry on negotiations with the crowd watching and following every word of their talk. He wished he could have some privacy with her. But this was a one-room house where everybody came and stood about or sat down anywhere. If he could get her alone, he would either coax her or wring her neck. He felt helpless and desperate and suddenly turned round and left. He came again a week later. Suddenly turned round. He came again a week later, but it proved no better. She neither welcomed him nor asked him to leave. He suggested to her to come to the car. This time he had brought his small car. She declined his invitation. After all, that woman was old enough to die. He reflected, this fool is ruining her life. He allowed 4 more weeks for the mourning period and visited her again. but found a big gathering in her house, overflowing into the street. She sat at the back of the little hall, holding up her tambura, and was singing to the audience as if it were an auditorium. A violinist and a drummer had volunteered to play the accompaniments. She's frittering away her art, he thought. She said, "Come, sit down." He sat in a corner, listened for a while, and slipped away unobtrusively. Again and again, he visited her and found, at all hours of the day, people around her waiting for her music. News about her free music sessions spread. People thronged there in cars, bicycles, and on foot. Verma of the Borderless brought a box of sweets wrapped in gilt paper and handed it to Sylvie silently and went away, having realized his ambition to approach his goddess with an offering. Sylvie never spoke unnecessarily. She remained brooding and withdrawn all day, not noticing or minding anyone coming in or going out. Mohan thought he might be able to find her alone, at least at night. At 11 o'clock one night, he left his car in Market Road and walked to Vinayak Mudali Street. He called in softly through the door of Selvi's house. "My dear, it is me. I have to talk to you urgently. Please open the door, please." Appealing desperately through the darkened house, Selvi opened the window shutter just a crack and said firmly, "Go away. It is not proper to come here at this hour." Mohan turned back with a lump in his throat, swearing half aloud, "Ungrateful wretch," and he had to go away. That's the end of the story named Selvi. Thank you. We'll have another story another time. See you then. Bye bye.